From the president finally announcing Israel Adesanya's next opponent, to Dricus making his beef with the last stylebender personal, this is Israel Adesanya revealing his next fight. For starters, it's a competition between two elite-level fighters. The last time we saw the last stylebender inside the octagon was back at UFC 287, when he reclaimed his throne after knocking out the dominant Alex Pereira. Before this event, a lot of fans thought Izzy would never rise to the top again. But what do you know, not only does he finally get his revenge, but he does it in style by reclaiming the middleweight title. And now that's sitting at the top, waiting impatiently for his next opponent. UFC President Dana White has finally broken the silence, as he names two potential opponents that might be getting a chance at Izzy and the middleweight title. I'm sure you know Robert Whittaker's at the top of that list. Not only has he been dominating the entire division, but he has considerable experience fighting against Adesanya. If successful, this will be the third time he fights him, and a third time is usually the charm. Plus, did you know Whittaker's only loss in 9 years has come against Izzy? Yeah. There's just so much on the line if things play out his way, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a bit. But let's quickly talk about his second potential opponent. Dricus du Plessis, ladies and gentlemen. The hot prospect from South Africa, who's won 7 fights in a row, with 6 of them being knockouts. Both of these guys are very dangerous and hungry. And regardless of who he's up against, Izzy's in for a really tough battle because both of them can't wait to get their hands on him. But who's it going to be? We'll find that out at UFC 290. Du Plessis and Whittaker are set to take each other on at UFC 290 in what's set to be a true banger, with some really impressive faces on the cards. But this matchup isn't just a free fight or something, it's actually a ticket to the finale, with the winner getting his shot at the middleweight title. So you can imagine how tough it's going to be, and how both of them will be bringing quite some intensity to the matchup. But what does the fight world think about all of this? Does Dricus really have what it takes to subdue someone as technical as Robert? Or is the Reaper's time at the top finally coming to an end? Well, despite the South African being much more energetic and ambitious, a lot of MMA personalities, including Israel, claims Whittaker is just too good for the upcoming prospect. And honestly speaking, I get the hype behind Dricus, but the Reaper is operating on an entirely different level. Like I said before, he hasn't lost a single fight to anyone other than Izzy in the last 9 years. So that just goes to show you how he's in a different league than the competition. That being said, I think Dricus also deserves credit for rising to the top in such a crowded division. And when you think about it, he only has one more challenge in front of him now. If he's able to get past Whittaker, it's going to be him and Izzy, locked up in a cage with the middleweight title on the line. And honestly, it's the more exciting matchup as well. As difficult as it might be for Dricus to defeat Whittaker, at the end of the day, Izzy going up against someone new is the more interesting battle. Besides, both these guys also have history. In early 2023, Dricus actually took a couple of swipes at the middleweight champion, questioning his African heritage. Du Plessis talked about how Izzy claims to be representing Africa on the main stage, but he's never done anything for the community, and neither has he ever taken the belt back to Africa. He even challenged Kamaru Usman, but the main attack was directed towards Adesanya. And trust me, when I say Izzy did not take the attack lightly, I mean he absolutely flipped out, threatening to destroy Du Plessis and drag his carcass across Africa if he didn't stop taking his name. Still Knox, however, enjoyed the attention and hype and continued talking about the last stylebender, including how they should settle their beef inside the octagon to decide who's in fact the true African champion at the UFC. Oh, and he also made promises about how he'd take the belt to Africa when he finally wins it. It's definitely an interesting matchup, because both of these guys actually want to fight each other. And believe it or not, Du Plessis was about to get this fight without having to go up against Whittaker. But I guess Uncle Dana thought it'd be unfair to give him a title fight without putting him through one last test. Either way, it's the fight these guys wanted, because Izzy has no interest in fighting Whittaker. There's no other way to put this. Adesanya has already fought and defeated the Reaper 2 times, and even though Robert sort of challenged him the second time around, it seems like Izzy has his number and won't have a lot of difficulty beating him for the third time around as well. Adesanya got all poetic and compared it to reading a book. Or in other words, it's a book he's already read twice and has no interest in reading again. Dricus, on the other hand, is new and presents a variety of challenges. So, he's naturally more excited for that matchup, but either way, regardless of who it'll be, Adesanya is ready. He's ready to establish himself as the greatest middleweight champion of all time as he begins his second reign of the division. Also, on a side note, stylistically, I believe Pereira was a much better matchup for Whittaker. Had he still been champion, the Reaper would have had a solid chance of finally reclaiming lost gold. But with Izzy at the top again, I think it's going to be difficult for Robert to win back the title. I do believe he's better than du Plessis, but whether he's evolved enough to beat the last stylebender is still a huge question mark. Oh, and do the fans even want to see this fight again? It'd be much more exciting to see someone new try their luck at Adesanya. But at the same time, I'm sure it's a bit unfair since Izzy himself got to fight Alex 4 times until he finally defeated him. So it's only natural Whittaker gets this fight, right? I'm not saying he deserves this fight because he's better on paper or something. I'm not even saying he should get it because he's the senior fighter. As long as he's able to defeat du Plessis at UFC 290, he has every right to be inside the octagon with the middleweight champion. And it's the same for Dricus. Beating the Reaper isn't exactly something casual. I feel the need to mention this over and over again, 9 years and only one guy he's lost to. If that isn't brilliance, then I don't know what is. But yeah, I say this because Israel has expressed a disinterest in fighting Whittaker for the 3rd time. I mean, if it were that simple, couldn't Pereira have denied Izzy a rematch and shut down his title hopes forever? Anyway, Uncle Dana didn't exactly reveal the timeline, but he did say that it's possible the fight might go down at UFC 293. Izzy, as usual, has absolutely no objections, as he enjoys his time as the king of the division, waiting to see who's going to be his next opponent. Only time will tell now whether the South African prospect has what it takes to take on someone as dominant as the Reaper. But there's also Izzy's personal conquest. I've already touched up on this a bit, but why does a potential fight against Dricus mean so much to Adesanya? Why doesn't he just focus on retaining the middleweight title and extending his reign? Well, I think du Plessis has done an exceptional job at triggering the champion. Izzy normally isn't the guy to pay too much attention to call-outs, but Still Knox challenging his African heritage has really seemed to have done the trick. Even in interviews and podcasts, Adesanya can't stop talking about how bad he wants to get his hands on him and show him who's the real African champion. Or, in simple words, Dricus has done an excellent job at building hype and selling the fight. Whittaker, on the other hand, isn't exactly that chatty with the mic or graphic with his call-outs. And with Izzy promising to drag du Plessis' carcass across Africa, the game has just become a lot more interesting. So, maybe that's why Adesanya is so bent on fighting the South African instead of Whittaker. Maybe he sees it as a conquest now. So from Dricus making his beef with the last stylebender personal, to the president finally announcing Israel's next opponent, this was Israel Adesanya revealing his next fight.